I'm sure we all agree. So briefly, I'll just say two words about Jisc, even though I was told it needs no introduction, just because, in case you've not been keeping track of what we've been doing over the last few years. So Jisc, we used to give you money, now we make stuff. Okay, that's my few words. So my role in Jisc is to lead the team that develop new services, and Learning Analytics is one of those, so I'm going to tell you a bit about that. So I'm going to do a bit of a sales job, first of all, for Learning Analytics, about why we should do it, show some of the evidence from previous projects that show this stuff might work, give you a bit of an overview on the stuff that we're doing, and just share some thoughts about what we could be doing next after Learning Analytics, which might sound a bit extreme given the figures we've seen about uptake so far, but bear with me on that one. So I'm going to give a very brief overview of what we mean by Learning Analytics for Jisc. So we are specifically talking about using big data techniques. So this is how we're kind of differentiating ourselves from business intelligence. And it's all about institutions and learners meeting their goals. So we've heard about retention. That's also important. But achievement is equally important. And we're also looking at employment and employability as well. So anything essentially we can gather data. So it's a fairly broad set of areas. And I think this has probably been covered quite well by some of our previous discussions, but I'll just go in and give a very quick explanation, and this is a layman's explanation, so I know we've got at least one statistician in the audience now, so that makes me nervous, about predictive learning analytics. So, and this kind of follows on from the question about how do we know kind of which kind of activities are important and that sort of thing. And the answer is that we kind of don't. So what we do is we take a big data set, a big historic data set, typically divide it into two parts, something like that. They got described as evil geniuses by my colleague, but actually they're good geniuses. Take it away and produce predictive models against the one half of the set of data, and then we can run it against the other part and see if it actually the predictions look good, and it can go for an iterative process. And typically what we do on our models is look at a fairly binary outcome. So we're looking at, will a student succeed, will they drop out or not? Can we make a model that shows that? Will they get a 2-2 or lower, or will they get higher than that? So we're looking at models for fairly binary states rather than trying to predict an actual grade. Okay, so that's just some kind of grounding on the stuff that we're going to talk about. So why do we want to do this? And again, some of the figures have already come up, but when I picked up some numbers on this, actually they're quite impressive, or the opposite of impressive, I guess. So if I look at retention first and then some attainment-related stuff. So if we look at our 16 to 18 sector, some estimates of that it's costing the economy nearly £1 billion a year, which is a sizable chunk of money. Depending on how you measure it, around 8% of students drop out, cost the university big chunk of money. And then we've got retention differences based on background as well. So this might sound obvious, but it's disadvantaging certain groups of students. So we know we can do good stuff here, and there's kind of a big problem to solve. Attainment. Okay, so various ways of looking at attainment, obviously, comparing UK with other countries, comparing with the past, etc. But I'm just going to look here at comparing groups of students, because in some ways this is quite a good way of looking at attainment. So what we see is that attainment, as in quality of degree, is impacted hugely by students' backgrounds. So whether students' parents have got a degree, big difference on ethnic background in terms of upper degrees. So quite clearly these people are receiving the same education, and we should be able to close the gap. Okay, so two big areas there that we can do some stuff. So why do we think this can work? So I'm going to show a bunch of work from the States, and last time I did this I got told off for not showing the UK stuff. So I'll start off by saying there's a link which you won't be able to read on our blog to UK things. The reason I'm showing the US stuff is, as Sarah said, to start with, a lot of the early work was done there, and also I thought there might well be people here giving UK examples, and they were, and I'd have told you the same thing. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of some of the stuff that kind of inspired our work. So the first one is Marist College in the States, and these are actually one of our partners on the project. I'll talk a bit more about what they're doing later. But they did some really good early work in a way that I'm not sure we get away with in the UK. It was a fairly rigorous study dividing the students into two groups. One set doing the analytics on them, if you like, one not, and comparing the outcomes. So they did the things that you've heard about, collected demographic and activity data, got a predictive model, showed a significantly positive impact on the final grades, etc. The other bit that's really important is that they showed that the models were relatively transferable between institutions. So if you took a model and created in one institution, it's got around the sort of 75% accuracy marks that you've been hearing about. When it moved to other institutions, by and large, it dropped a bit, but not significantly. And this means that if we do a bit of work in that area, we can actually get something that can move between one institution and another. Next one, another one, New York Institute of Technology, again creating predictive models. They got 3 out of 4 students predicted by their models, so another example showing that it worked. PARS, now this was a slightly different approach. This was creating a big data set using a common data structure. So about 2 million student records de-identified. So this is just demographic data, and they think that they can identify at-risk students with 90% confidence. Now that is kind of sad in a way. So this is saying, going back to the question about is it who you are or what you do that predicts. So take that with a pinch of salt, because if we really believe that, we might as well give up. But the thing that we took from this is that it was possible to create big data sets against a standard data model. And that's one of the things that we've put quite a lot of effort into. Next one, another system. This is one of the early famous, if you can be famous in the field of learning analytics, studies. Again, predictive algorithms, producing traffic lights, and statistically kind of relevant outcomes, although their maths has been possibly discredited. So read it for yourself and make a judgment. And last one, another one that was interesting was University of Maryland, Baltimore. And I think the thing here is, so they again did some stuff. Let students compare their VLE activity. So remember that Sarah was saying that some of the Nottingham Trent students were kind of surreptitiously sharing their activity data. So these people did it explicitly and found improvements in attainment. And they also found that this kind of stuff was sticky, so it carried over from one module to another. So we've taken some ideas from this as well and used them in our student app that I'll tell you a bit about. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of stuff out there that shows that this kind of thing has a good chance of working. Right, okay, so what are we doing? So our mission is to make the UK the most digitally advanced learning and research country. So in this space at the moment, yes, we are lagging behind some countries, but we think we will rapidly overtake them, and now lots of other countries are looking at what we're doing as a model instead. And it's quite telling, actually, that we're working with some of the kind of best people around the world on this now. So what we're doing is developing an architecture, and I'll say a bit more about that. So that's actually a service and a way of doing it. A toolkit, which is essentially advice on things like ethics and so on. So it is the things you need to do. And then community, it's showing good practice and that sort of thing. So I'll just touch upon our code of practice first of all as one of the items from our toolkit. It's on our website if you want to go and have a look at it. The ethics side on this are complex but not insurmountable. One of our colleagues did a thorough literature review, which is also on the blog. If you want to read it, it's actually 75 pages of actually very readable stuff on this, so it's actually pretty fascinating. We have distilled it down, though, to a 2 or 3 page code of conduct that the NUS have endorsed as well. So it's a great starting point for the things that you should do. And these are things that are morally correct as well as legally correct, we think, for learning analytics. Next thing, so we did a bit of survey on students, and not surprising that students were happy to share their data for this sort of thing. I've given the smiley bit on that. They're less happy about sharing their results and activity of one another if you read the rest of the report. So have a look through, but we think that it's not overwhelming against them when they try it. That will change. So the things we're doing, we're creating a national architecture, we're defining standards and models, and then we're implementing a bunch of core services and sample services on top. So we've got a massive opportunity in this country to do this really well. So if you looked at the charts at the beginning that Sarah showed, most people haven't done anything in this space or have done very little. So we've actually got a kind of greenfield site for this. Yeah? So we can actually kind of learn from the past and think, right, what would a VLE or a student record system really look like if we were to start and do it from scratch? And it wouldn't be like we've done it now. We build standards, approaches, architectures and things that were modeled. So we're trying to take that approach and do it with learning analytics. So once we've got that in place, it means that models can be shared, visualizations, other bits and pieces. We can do research across the piece and so on. So it makes the whole thing much more efficient. We can create shared infrastructure, so lowers the cost significantly. And also, we can actually lower the barrier to innovation. So there's a whole bunch of standard things that you need to do to create the kind of basis for learning analytics around the data. But the interesting stuff happens at the modeling and visualization side. So if we can make the kind of underpinning stuff easy, we should see more innovation in the fun and useful stuff and the thing that's really going to make a difference. So our architecture looks like this. So I guess the bits in blue are core underpinning architecture, and the bits in red are things that we're implementing as useful services in their own right, and also hopefully inspiration for people to build other services on. So if I just start from the bottom and explain what we've got. So first of all, as you heard, we need to get a whole bunch of data. There's 2 sets of data, static data and fluid data, activity data. So what we want to do is to make collecting that as painless as possible. So I'll explain a bit about how we've done that, but the idea is that we can pull in data from VLE, library, student record system, self-declared data, so it's data that students want to talk about, and other data sources, and put it all in standard format into our learning records warehouse. And I now regret using the warehouse term because it's not a traditional Kimball type model warehouse, it's essentially a big data store. So once we've got that in place, we can then build things on it. So what we've done is essentially got a framework agreement in place where we've got suppliers producing services, and we're essentially running a project over the next, well, I've got another year to run, people trying out the different bits on this. So analytics processor, we've got 2 vendors in that do the actual predictions. We've got dashboards so that staff can look at the outcome. We think that dashboards are important for buy-in, but I'm sure, as you know, with any other dashboard, the problem is getting people to look at them. So there's no point doing analytics if there's no intervention, and there's no point having dashboards if no one looks at them. So we've got a concept called the alert and intervention system. So the theory here is that there are some people whose responsibility is to actually coordinate the intervention. They don't want to look at a dashboard every day to see who's at risk. They want to get a message that tells them that it's at risk. So as part of our architecture, we've defined standard messages for interventions. So it can essentially put out alert. That system can case manage it. And to answer one of the questions that came up earlier today about looking at the effectiveness of the intervention, we've also then got a standard to push the intervention details back into the Learning Records warehouse, so you can then start modelling what interventions are successful. We've got a consent tool, which is for students to control how their data is used or how they are contacted based on the data. So it's not controlling collection, because that's happening anyway, it's controlling data use. And then we've got Student App, which is showing stuff to the student. So the idea then is that there's a whole bunch of APIs that explain how this stuff works, and people can build other services on top of it. So the people we're working with at the moment, just to give you an idea, a good and diverse group of people. So Unicon are from the States. They're lead developers on the Apereo open learning analytics products. So what we're doing there is basically taking some early stage open source software around predictions, dashboards, that sort, and intervention management. We're making them industrial scale, fit for hosting in the UK, matching the UK model. So that's pretty good. We've got Maris, who I talked about. We've got Blackboard. Really key to get Blackboard on the project. So if you think back to my model, I want to get data out of the VLE. That was tough. It's not now. We've worked with Blackboard to build an emitter that basically sends the data out, same for Moodle, in the same format. So I'll explain a bit more about how that works. Tribal, they are providers of one of the predictive solutions and dashboards, Tribal Insight. TherapyBox are our student app developer, and HT2 are the developers of the Learning Records warehouse. So great group of people who we've got working on it. So I'll just show you the sorts of things that people can see when they use the service. So dashboards, this is one of my favourite slides, and just because we've got a student there who's looking really happy, but he's dismal. But this is the typical sort of thing you see on these dashboards. So prediction history, here we've got things that are influencing the prediction. So typically it's about the student, their enrolment, their engagement and academic performance. So say two tools in our project on this, Tribal and the Open Dashboard one. So that's for people to look at. Typically these will show at a institution, course, module level, so you've got to drill down and look at the predictions. The student app, so this is nearly ready for release now, and we've unashamedly nicked this in terms of how it works from fitness apps, because fitness apps work remarkably well for some people, and we know that this kind of thing isn't for everyone. But what it does is, first of all, lets people make friends in a social media sense and share their dashboards with them if they wish. It lets them make comparisons. So on the Nottingham Trent one, you saw they could compare their activity with the course average. On ours, they'll also be able to compare their activity with students who are doing really well. So this is essentially, if there's a big enough group, it will show the average activity of, say, the top 10% of students. It then lets people create self-declared data. So there's a whole bunch of things that we can't at the moment automatically collect data around that it would be useful for students to track. So this is things like they can set how long they've been reading, studying, experimenting, that sort of thing. And they can set themselves targets, get badges, see that kind of thing. So that's ready for its first trial, we think, next month. And then we've got the alert and intervention type process. This is actually a US screenshot. If you look at the detail there, you'll see some of the things aren't correct for the UK. But idea here is alert comes in that a student is at risk, some detailed background about why, somebody, personal tutor, retention officer, somebody who cares essentially, can take action. So we think that it's really important that a human actually does the intervening, record what they've done, feeds it back into the model, and hopefully solves the problem. So that's based on an open source tool called Student Success Plan. So those are the core bits that we're providing for people to use. I'll just touch a little bit about how it works in terms of collecting the data. So as we've seen before, there are essentially two sets of data. There's the stuff about the student, and there's the activity or the fluid data. So our approach is to develop a standard model for the student and the courses they're taking, and basically use an ETL type process to get that into the warehouse. I can talk a bit more about that at lunchtime if anyone wants to know the details. So that's essentially the approach there is if we can use a system's tools to do it, great. If not, we're looking at using things like Kettle, the open source ETL tool, to kickstart that process. Then we've got the activity data. So what we're doing is using a standard called Tin Can or XAPI. So annoyingly, there are two competing standards in this space, Caliper and Tin Can. Caliper's not, in our opinion, quite ready to be used in production. XAPI is. But what it is, it gives us a standard way of getting data in to describe activity from VLE, library, the self-declared data, anything else that people do. And I think this is the kind of real core bit about how it all works. So what we want to be able to do is to compare activities, have activities described the same way from different systems. So we want to access a course to be the same as if it was in Moodle or Blackboard. We want attend a lecture to be the same regardless of how that data was collected. And the reason for do that is that we can then start sharing our models, sharing our visualizations, etc., etc. So the way we do this is with what's called an XAPI recipe, which is a nice way of describing just a common way of describing the activity. So again, if anyone's interested in the detail, we've done this in the open on GitHub. It's fascinating reading for those that like that sort of thing. Otherwise, it's like really boring. So take your pick. But what we've got is basically the supplier group and the early institutions that have been working with us have helped us define these. So once we've got that standard data model, standard XAPI recipes, all in a warehouse, we can start building stuff quickly on top of it. So where we are in the project, so we've got about 70 institutions that have expressed interest. We're currently engaging with about 24. It starts off at the moment with the discovery process where essentially consultants come in, spend some time with you, look at institutional readiness, data readiness, strategic buying, that sort of thing, produce a report, and then you can move on. Then what we're doing is deploying our kind of core services to a number of institutions. So we're just working with our first 8 institutions to deploy, actually no, it's the first 10 institutions, I think, actually, to deploy various bits of the architecture. So I should have updated our numbers here now because it's significantly more. So we've got quite a few million records collected in real time from Moodle from a number of institutions. I think we're up to about 80 million XAPI records, and I think it's about 30 million Blackboard records now. So it gives you an idea of the sort of data sets, and this is for our first 2 or 3 institutions. So it's reasonably chunky sets of data to work on. And what we're doing is we want to push out to, we think, probably another 30 institutions over the next year or so. And after that, it will essentially become a Jisc service with we're hoping, a fairly low cost, certainly much lower than if you were to do it any other way. So we've got a great spread of people trying the service at the moment. So it's not all just retention focused. So we've got Russell Group interested in widening participation students and students getting 2-1s. We've got students that are interested obviously in retention. We've got some wanting to understand how to improve their teaching. So broad range of people taking different parts of the kind of set of services. So that's what we're doing at the moment, but this is all part of a bigger plan, really, I guess. So we can see at the moment, we know that learning analytics can improve retention, improve attainment, but there's a whole extra bunch of stuff we can do if we get our data in order. Yeah. So that's why we're really keen on having these standards. So first one is we're working alongside the Head of Data Landscape project. So they are looking at standardized data student model. So we'll very much be aligning with that for higher education. Our model, we're calling it a UDD, Unified Definitions, because it also covers FE. But if we can have one standard way of describing our data across the sector, so us, HESA, being consistent, it's not just about data collections then. Data collections are, at the moment, a kind of one-off activity. We want the data in real time. Once you combine the two, it's pretty powerful. There's a picture of them. Right, next one then, learning gain, teaching excellence framework. So at the moment, methods for those are all fairly old-fashioned type processes, I guess. So it's tests, surveys, and all that kind of stuff. Going forward, when we've got a big data set that describes all these things, we'll have a lot better ways of measuring things like learning gain, teaching excellence, and all that kind of stuff. So again, huge advantages if we can actually kind of get it all in standardized format, real time. Right, another one. So I don't know if you've heard about this one, Iceland's Decode project. This is one of my colleagues' slides, who's a physicist by trade, but I think he saw the parallels, and actually it seems true. So in Iceland, they've created a massive DNA bank, because people don't move out of Iceland, I think, so they can trace back. It's a nice place, why would you? But once you've got this kind of bank, you can start doing all sorts of interesting things like genetics, predictors, and personalised medicine. So we've got the opportunity to do the same thing for education. No one else in the world's doing it. We want to be world leaders. So we get all this data, then make it attractive to the best scientists, data scientists, developers. We can start doing some really interesting stuff. So deep understanding of e-learning, the learning gain metrics that we talked about, and things like personalised next generation learning, which I think is my last slide. So idea then is, again, at the moment, we're just teaching the same way we've been for hundreds of years. At some point it will change. It's going to be around data that drives it. If we've got our act together, we can start building these kind of services on top. So that's all I wanted to say. So any questions, I guess? Apart from when's lunch? Because it's 15 minutes. He's wandering around with a microphone at the moment.
Hi there. Is the work you're doing with Tribal limited to their Insight dashboard, or are you also working with them on getting the data out of SITs?
Correct, yes. So what the process is, the data comes out of SITs into our standard student data model using the Unity product, I think it's called. Yes, I've got the thumbs up there. That's correct. Yeah. So basically, for everyone, the idea is that it goes into the standard data model. It just so happens, actually, that the first 3 people were all SITS customers that we started working with. So, yeah, and they've been actually fantastically helpful to us. I will say this, because we've got people in the room from SITS. That they really have in working collaboratively with us to get the data model right and get the data out.
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Is there a view that we collect an awful lot of data during secondary education?
Yeah.
Is there a view of bringing that in as well, so you get that full picture of their education
I would absolutely love to be able to do that, yeah. So we think the prerequisite for this to be really viable is the unique learner number being implemented across the board. Once we've got that, and it's really is unique, so we know students have multiple unique learner numbers at the moment, we can do some really fantastic stuff. So at the moment, if you think about the predictive models, early on, you've not got a lot of activity information, so it's skewed towards who they are, and it's only as they start doing stuff you can start bringing activity data. You're absolutely right, it would be fantastic to have a history of activity as well. So we're not doing anything immediately with it other than building in the ULN to everything, and, you know. Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Hi.
Hello, yes. I saw you using TinCan or Experience API. So am I right in assuming everything has to go through a learning record store like Learning Locker?
Correct,
Is that how you're
yeah, so essentially what we've done, we have essentially procured and deployed a big Learning Locker in, which is a multi-tenanted solution in Rackspace in London, so that we can all essentially put it in at low cost for the same space.
So you're saying that's available as a service then?
Correct.
And just one other question.
Yeah.
You mentioned Blackboard had been working on Moodle plugins to get logs through those statements.
Blackboard on Blackboard plugins, us on Moodle plugins.
Oh, you're developing the
Well,
Moodle plugins.
yeah, so what we've done actually, there was already some prior work on the Moodle plugin, but what we wanted shared recipes essentially between the Blackboard and Moodle plugin. So what we're doing is working on the Moodle plugin to make it emit the same as the Blackboard. So when you do something in Blackboard or Moodle, the end result looks the same.
And are they available to download and test at the moment? Or?
So the Moodle one is on GitHub, and the version that's running on new recipes, I think, just become usable last week, but there's a mature version that runs the old Moodle recipes out there. The Blackboard one, it's only just finished, so we're working with our first couple of customers to try it, but it will be widely available once it's tested fully.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks.
Hi, Michael. Thank you. Excuse me, Steve Rowd at UCL. You mentioned at the beginning sort of three aims: retention, achievement, and employability.
Yeah.
And I think you covered retention and achievement quite a bit. Could you talk a bit more about how you think this might be used for employability, which of course would be no doubt very attractive to students?
Yeah, okay. So the thing that's happening that's really interesting on this, and it's actually more in the FE space with Biz, and I don't know how widely this is known, is that which sets of records are? It must be the tax records, unemployment benefit records, and all of those have all essentially been collated to give a really good data set of student employment after they leave. And I think this is targeted at Biz's area, so it's obviously the skills sector and so on. But it actually gives a really fascinating data set. They tell me it was created through Act of Parliament and it can only be used in certain ways, but it does show that there is a way of getting actual really good data about employment if we all collaborate on it. So what we wanted, so at the moment it's only available publicly at the aggregated level, so it can't be used for individual analytics. But what we want to do is to keep working with them to try and work out a way of getting it at the individual level, because what we need to do is have a data set that essentially goes forward in time and isn't based on laborious manual collection of data. So that's our kind of big aim, I guess, on that one. The smaller one, which is more near term, is again looking at the skills sector at the moment, working probably with the Manchester area about essentially working with the education providers there, the employers, and trying to actually map through stuff. But it's something that's at the early planning stage rather than having any models. But the end game we want to be the same essentially, so you can say, I want to be X. give me a prediction whether that's going to happen, and if I do Y, does that prediction change? That's the kind of what we want to do.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Michael. Interesting
Hiya.
conversation. Richard Gascoigne from Solution Path. I'm particularly interested in the future of the data landscape, because one thing that we can't predict is how students are going to interact in the future. So what's the plan for Jisc and the agility around new and future data sources?
Right. So this is what we're doing at the moment. So we've got our kind of list of data sources that we want to attack. So these are the ones that we'll essentially actively pick up. So we picked up VLE just because everyone's got one, and also the marketplace Moodle and Blackboard cover 90%. The next target is around library activity data. So our specific plans there are reading lists and activity data around those, and then data at the authentication layer to the e-resources. And again, this is just because it's a low-hanging fruit. If anyone wants to talk to me in more detail about getting data from e-journals, e-books and that sort of thing, feel free to, but it's not that straightforward at the moment. Attendance data is the next one. So those are our kind of initial sets that we want to hit that are pretty much sector-wide. After that, what we're doing, so we've got a suppliers meeting actually at the end of this month to kind of talk through how we do this, but we want to have a process that kind of mirrors what we've done for the VLE and the other recipes we got at the moment, where we can work collaboratively and essentially have a set of recipes for new things as they come online, agreed across the sector at certainly at the UK level. And I think if we do that, we can keep it all in sync. So if you want to look at the details, have a peek at our GitHub. And we want to work out how we can get a governance model around that, essentially.
Can you see a world where stat returns aren't done by individual universities going forward, and it all comes out of a centralised place like this?
Yes. Look, we all want to make that stuff easier, and this is partly why us, HESA UK, are working together, trying to make that happen.
Hi, you said that just be providing the service. Is it going to be you buy everything, or were you able to pick and choose which parts of it you opt in? So if we wanted to use a different mobile app for doing some stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. The core bit, essentially, to take part fully is data into our learning records warehouse. After that, it's completely up to you what you build on top, and that's really what we want to do. We've got some stuff, but we really want innovation in that space.
Okay, no more questions, and we want to thank Michael for his presentation.